Clara's truck broke down on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of nowhere, somewhere between the small town of Cedar Hollow and the even smaller town of Dust Creek. The engine sputtered, coughed like an old man choking on pipe smoke, and then gave up entirely. She sat in the cab for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the steam curling from under the hood, and wondering what she had done to deserve this particular day. She had already lost her job at the marketing firm in Denver. Her boyfriend of 3 years had left her for a yoga instructor named Breeze. Her apartment lease was up at the end of the month, and she was driving to her aunt's ranch to figure out her next move. Now this. She climbed out of the truck and stood on the gravel shoulder, looking in both directions at nothing but golden grass, pine-covered mountains, and a sky so blue it almost hurt. There was no cell service. There were no other cars. There was only the wind and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. That was when she heard the horse. He came down a dirt trail that cut through the trees, riding a tall chestnut mare with the easy confidence of someone who had been born in a saddle. He wore a faded denim shirt with the sleeves rolled up, dusty boots, and a hat that had clearly seen better decades. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines around his eyes that came from squinting into too many sunsets. He looked like he was maybe 35, though it was hard to tell. Men like him aged differently out here. He pulled the horse to a stop and looked at her, then at the truck, then back at her. "Engine trouble?" he asked. His voice was low, unhurried, the kind of voice that suggested he had never once been in a rush in his entire life. "No, I just thought this would be a lovely place to stand and cry," Clara said, and then immediately felt embarrassed. "Sorry, yes, engine trouble." He smiled, and it changed his whole face. "I can take a look if you want." He dismounted and tied the mare to a fence post, then walked over and lifted the hood. He studied the engine the way a doctor might study an X-ray, poking at things, wiggling hoses, and wiping his hands on his jeans. After a few minutes, he straightened up and shook his head. "Your radiator's cracked, and your water pump is leaking. You're not driving this anywhere today. Maybe not tomorrow either." Clara felt the last thread of her composure begin to fray. "Is there a mechanic nearby?" "Old Dale in Cedar Hollow, but he's gone fishing until Thursday. Only mechanic for 50 miles. "Of course he is." The cowboy looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him making some kind of decision behind those quiet brown eyes. "I've got a place up the mountain. You're welcome to stay until Dale gets back. I've got a phone that works, a spare room, and I could cook a decent enough meal." Everything Clara had ever been taught told her not to go to a stranger's mountain home, but something about this man, something in the steadiness of his gaze and the gentleness with which he had handled the horse, made her feel safe in a way she could not explain. "I don't even know your name," she said. "Jack Calloway." "Clara Weston." "Nice to meet you, Clara. Now, can you ride a horse?" She could not, as it turned out, ride a horse, but Jack helped her up onto the mare and walked alongside them, leading the animal by the reins up a winding trail that climbed through thick stands of pine and aspen. He carried her suitcase over one shoulder as if it weighed nothing. They talked as they walked, or rather, Clara talked and Jack listened, which was something she was not used to. She told him about her job, about Breeze, the yoga instructor, about the apartment she could no longer afford. He nodded in all the right places and never once offered unsolicited advice, which she found almost miraculous. She asked him about himself, and he gave her very little. He said he raised horses. He said he had lived in these mountains most of his life. He said he liked the quiet. She assumed he was a small-time rancher, the kind of man who scraped by on hard work and stubbornness, living in some rustic cabin with a wood stove and a tin roof. She felt a strange kind of respect for that life, even as she pitied it a little. They had been walking for about 40 minutes when they reached a tall iron gate set into a stone wall that stretched in both directions through the trees. The wall was covered in moss and looked like it had been there for 100 years. The gate itself was ornate, with scrollwork that depicted running horses and mountain peaks. Clara stared. "What is this?" Jack pulled a small remote from his pocket and pressed a button. The gates swung open silently. Beyond them was a paved road lined with mature oaks, curving gently upward through manicured grounds. And at the end of that road, nestled against the mountainside as if it had grown there naturally, was the most beautiful estate Clara had ever seen. It was enormous, but not ostentatious. Built of natural stone and dark timber, it had wide windows that reflected the sky, covered porches that wrapped around every side, and gardens that cascaded down the hillside in terraces of wildflowers and native grasses. There were stables to the left, pristine and modern, where she could see at least a dozen horses in paddocks. To the right was a guest house that was larger than any home she had ever lived in. A creek ran through the property, crossed by a stone bridge, and beyond the main house she could see a lake glittering in the afternoon light. Clara's mouth was open. She knew it was open. She could not close it. "This is your place?" she finally managed. "Home," Jack said simply. He helped her down from the horse and led her inside. The interior was warm and elegant, full of exposed beams, handcrafted furniture, and artwork that Clara recognized as museum quality. A massive stone fireplace dominated the living room, and floor-to-ceiling windows framed a view of the valley below that looked like a painting. "Jack," she said slowly, "what exactly do you do?" He set her suitcase down and rubbed the back of his neck, looking almost sheepish. "I breed horses. Quarter horses mostly, some Arabians. We sell to ranches, racing operations, a few royal families overseas." He paused. "My grandfather started the operation. My father grew it. I just try not to mess it up." Clara sank on a leather sofa that probably cost more than her car. "You're rich," she said. "The land is rich," he said carefully. "I just live on it." Over the next 2 days, Clara discovered that Jack Calloway was, by any reasonable measure, extraordinarily wealthy. His operation was one of the most respected horse breeding programs in the country. He owned thousands of acres of mountain land. He had a staff of 12 who managed the property, though they lived in town and came up during the day. He donated to wildlife conservation, funded scholarships for rural kids, and had quietly built a free veterinary clinic in Cedar Hollow. But none of that was what made Clara fall in love with him. It was the way he sat with a sick foal through the night, sleeping on a hay bale so he could check on it every hour. It was the way he cooked her breakfast each morning, simple eggs and toast, and asked her what she wanted to do with her life, as if the answer genuinely mattered to him. It was the way he showed her the mountain at dawn, the light spilling over the peaks like liquid gold, and stood beside her in silence because he understood that some moments don't need words. On Thursday morning, Dale fixed her truck. Jack drove her down the mountain in his old ranch pickup with the dented fender and the dog hair on the seats, and stood beside her while the mechanic handed over the keys. "You could stay," he said. He said it quietly, the way he said everything, as if the words were stones he was placing carefully in a creek bed. Clara looked at him, this man in his dusty boots and faded hat, standing in a gravel parking lot in a town with one stoplight. She thought about Denver, about her empty apartment, about the life she had been so desperate to hold together as if it fell apart in her hands. "I could," she said. She drove her truck back up the mountain that evening. Jack was waiting at the gate, leaning against the stone wall with his arms crossed and that quiet smile on his face, as if he had known all along that she would come back. Some people spend their whole lives searching for home without realizing that home is not a place. It is a person. It is the moment someone sees you clearly, without pretense, and opens the gate anyway. Clara had found hers on a broken-down road in the middle of nowhere, in the steady hands of a man she had mistaken for poor, who turned out to be the richest person she had ever known in every way that mattered.